Hello and welcome to Lunch with Lee. I'm your host Shane Lee. Today on the show, Peter Overton, an Australian television journalist and Channel 9 news presenter. He's worked in radio at 2GB, as a reporter for 60 Minutes, and now is regarded as the #1 newsreader in Australia. He's the patron of the Monster Foundation, a charity raising money and awareness for motor neuron disease. He's also the patron of many other charities, which we'll talk about later. But away from the studio, he's a father of 2 girls and married media personality Jessica Rowe. Welcome, Pete.
Shane, great to see you. Thanks for having me.
Really appreciate you coming on the show. And David Fox Colley, a former Australian fast bowling all-rounder, called your fast bowler there, Fox.
Thank you.
Playing 3 tests for Australia and 87 first-class matches for New South Wales. Away from cricket, he worked with Channel 9 during the World Series.
Yep.
He also ran a very successful advertising agency. He's a great bloke. He's a good mate. He's a wonderful storyteller and loves a beer. Welcome, Fox.
Hey, thanks, Shane.
Now, Pete, I'll quickly start with you. I always try and get a junior reporter for every show, and my junior reporter doing the research for me for this particular episode was Carl Stefanovic.
Dear, oh dear.
And I said,
Thanks for having me. See you.
what can I ask Pete? And he said, well, first you say to Pete, he's the best newsreader in the country, bar none.
Thank you, Carl.
He said then, but ask him, if he didn't go out so much on the beers, do you think he could improve?
Well, isn't that interesting?
Facetious?
Carl talking about himself again. I lead the quietest life, Shane.
I know you do.
I lead the quietest life. But Carl is one of the great characters and one of the great people around Channel 9, and I've known him for a long, long time, and I think he's one of the great talents too.
He is.
Is this about Carl or is it about me?
It's about you. Okay. We can talk about Carl.
Yeah, no, he's
Carl,
a beauty.
like
He's an absolute ripper.
How long have you been at Channel 9 for now?
32 years.
Jeez.
Yeah, I started as a junior sports reporter on the 6 o'clock news. Okay. Brian Henderson was reading the news. Ken Sutcliffe was doing the sport.
Yes.
Tim Sheridan and David Peters were the senior sports reporters, and I just spent some time in Channel 7 Adelaide. And before that, I was at Sky Racing, and before that, I was at 2UE. And I just suddenly thought, I don't know whether TV is for me. And I'd done an economics degree at Macquarie University, and I said to my mum and dad, and I was in my early 20s, you know what, I think I might go back and get a dip ed and do teaching. And I got a call from 9 in Sydney, and the late, great Paul Fenn was the news director, and Fenny rang me. He said, I've offered you a position at 9 once. We don't do it twice, but in your case, I'm going to offer you a position.
Wow. So
I said to my mum and dad, I think I'll take it and I'll see how I go and give it one more shot. And that was 32 years ago,
Good
September
decision.
1991. And, I've had just the most fulfilling career, and it's still fulfilling every day. I just love going to work.
Fox, we'll talk about your cricket in a minute, but you worked with Channel 9 during World Series.
I did.
Working for Packer. What was that like?
Well, Sam Chisholm, a fairly interesting duo.
Yeah.
And David Hill, Hilly, who, of course, is a legend. It was interesting. I got picked on what we called the milk run, which was which were the sort of the players that didn't quite make the big cut, and were prepared to go and play in places like Orange and Dubbo and Mudgee and those sort of places. Against Michael Holding on underprepared wickets with no sideboards.
No, thank you.
I thought, this is probably not a career move for me, as my career was in advertising. And then they offered me the opportunity to become the interviewer. Because the first year's interview, the poor bloke, it must have got too much for him. Because one of the things that the players weren't briefed, you see.
Okay.
And so they didn't know how to interview. They thought, saying the magic word on telly was really clever and funny and made everybody else laugh except for the audience. But and it made it difficult, but it was fun. I got that gig and did that for a season. And then my boss in advertising suggested that I might have to make a career decision, which was always going to be advertising because that was my love. And that was my very focused career path was to make a successful advertising agency.
And you did that very well, yeah.
Yeah, I did. I had quite a simple philosophy that I knew that the big agencies were always going to go after the big accounts, but they didn't want to have the smaller divisions of the big accounts, like the audio division of Sony and those sorts of things. And I thought, they're the ones I'll go after. And I went after all those, and I finished up picking up about half a dozen small accounts, but with big names. So the foyer looked good, lots of nice logos in the foyer. Budgets weren't enormous, but very profitable, very profitable.
Pete, I know you love your cricket. You were born in England, but you moved here when you were 2. Tell me you don't go for the Poms and the Ashes.
No, but I love the Ashes.
Yes. Good answer.
No, I absolutely support Australia, but I love it when you have an Ashes series and it's coming down to a decider or whatever. You know, it's the greatest cricket. Even if one of the sides isn't as strong as each other, it still pulls a full SCG. Yeah. You know, I used to take my mum and dad out. They're a bit old for it now, but we'd go out for days at a time. And no, I was born in England. Mum and dad. Dad was a junior doctor at Royal North Shore Hospital and met Mum, who was a nursing sister. And back in the 60s, you had to go to England to do your specialty. And Dad, ultimately, he did anaesthesia and ended up in a place called Winchester where I came along and, you know, Dad, who is still alive, and Mum, he ended up as Professor of Paediatric Anaesthesia at the Children's Hospital in Sydney, an absolute legend and revered all over the world. But yeah, my life began in England, but I'm an Aussie through and through.
And did you have, from a sporting perspective in cricket, do you have any idols growing up you used to love to watch?
Oh, I thought Shane Lee was fantastic.
Great answer. We're back after a short break.
I'm feeling very hurt.
I loved Alan Border's Steel. I've got a great story about Border. He was leading Australia, and I went to a one-day. I caught the bus from Longueville, where I grew up, into the city, and then off to the SCG. And the Windies thrashed them in a one-day the night before. And Paul Fenn again said to me, I was a young sports reporter, he said, "You've got to go to Sydney Airport and you've got to get an interview with Border about this." And I said, "That ain't going to happen, I don't think, Fanny." And he said, "Well, you better not come back without it." So I went out there to the Ansett terminal, and I can still see Alan Border walking across, leading the team, and he saw me and the camera crew, and he just, scowled. Yeah. And I said,
grumpy.
Yeah, I went up to him. I said, "Look, Alan, Peter Overton from Channel 9 News. I've just started as a sports reporter. I have to go back with an interview, and if I don't, I'm toast." And he said, no interviews. I said, "Well, mate, I went to North Sydney Boys and you went to North Sydney Boys, and if you're going to let down one of your fellow North Sydney boys, we got a problem." Yeah. And I went back with the interview.
Well done.
Yeah. But I love cricket. I just love what you guys achieved. I wish I could do what you guys, including you, Fox, on and off the ground.
Hold on. Sorry, Anth,
we'll get to that. But the reason I asked that question, one of my idols was growing up was Dennis Lillee. And Fox, you opened the bowling with him, the 72 Ashes.
Yeah, I roomed with him as well.
You roomed with him?
For the whole 5 months. He wouldn't... what was that like? Supposed to... experience for both of us. He wouldn't... we were supposed to change roomies every 1 month, so we didn't get tired of each other. And Lillee said, "Under no circumstances am I going to swap with anyone to piss the fox off. No way. No way." So we roomed together.
Don't want an angry fox.
No. Well, I think there were other reasons, because of my wonderful company, rhetoric, repartee, and general good round sort of human being, which I am.
Because you were, on those tours, you were pretty young. And any truth in the rumours, you were a good looking lad. You had a nice hair. Did the older bloke send you in as a bit of the man bait, the lure?
Well, I didn't have to be encouraged very hard, but
same as Fox in the hen house, so to speak.
No encouragement required there. Look, I managed to get a few photo shoots here and there, and
good answer.
You mentioned Dennis Lillee. I must say, I did a documentary on Ian Chappell, and I interviewed Dennis, the late, great Rod Marsh.
Yep.
Jeff Thompson stormed into the interview and stormed out. He was a cyclone. That was hilarious. I'll never forget, we were sitting in this old grandstand at the University Oval in Adelaide, and I'd never met Dennis, but I watched him as a kid. I used to go out to the Showground World Series cricket and sit on the boundary rope, and you'd have Andy Roberts and Michael Olding and Joel Garner, and you think, wow, I can reach out and touch him. And I had never experienced such charisma coming back at me than from Dennis Lillee. He just, at age 70, he just filled that grandstand, his presence. And we took a photo, and I showed my wife at home, and, there was Rod Marsh, Ian Chappell and Dennis Lillee and myself.
Wow.
And she said, "Wow, who's that? Is that Dennis Lillee?" She said, "Wow, he looks fantastic."
Still radiates.
Yeah, amazing. And you know those people, don't you, Fox? Like yourself, you radiate charisma. And it's like Barack Obama.
I radiate something or other.
But Barack Obama, when he was last in town, you could just feel it through the television screen.
Yes, I can imagine. Yeah. Well, he's doing it now, isn't he? Dennis was, and also just a fantastic bloke, just a great roomie. Yeah. You know, it's like to have a crook roomie, and he was just a great roomie, and just a wonderful fellow. It's amazing, actually. He has a sixth sense. When I was struggling, I had a triple bypass a few years ago, and when I was struggling, it's as if he had some sort of godly awareness. He rang me on the night that I was at my worst and said,
Jeez.
"How are you going, Fox?" I said, "No good. I'm not good at all." He said, "All right, well, look, I've got a doctor and he's my doctor in Sydney and he's a genius and I want you to go and see him." I said, "Well, how can I do that?" He said, "I will ring him from here." I don't know what time it was in Perth, and I will fix it. And I was seeing that doctor the next morning, and for Dennis just to have that sort of sense, it wasn't a fluke, because a couple of times when I had both my knees done, God, I sound like the $1 million man. No, I'm not. Anyway, try it, $100 man. When I was having my knees done, he rang me, and he had no idea I was having my knees done. Oh, geez, he's got. What's he got?
He's got something. He's got
some telescope on me or something.
Got X Factor, and he's got X Factor and charisma, and a very decent human being,
and a wonderful human being.
Can I ask a question on the heart thing? Did you ever have any checkups at all leading up to that?
Yeah, I was crook for a long while. It was, and I just sort of kept on thinking. It's the old story. Just got a bit of a headache, a bit of cold or something like that.
Men. Yep.
Yeah, and then
right.
we were in Stratford on Avon. Now and you know what a toff I am, and you know how incredibly eloquent, etc., etc. But we were on Stratford on Avon, Shakespeare country, and my missus had been taking me to all these erudite places which I had absolutely no understanding of.
That's Mrs. Foxhead.
Mrs. Foxhead, yeah. Yes. Yeah, she's an exceptional woman. Not speaking to me at the moment, so it's a bonus for both of us. Anyway, I did my duty, which is unusual for me. I had to carry both the suitcases. We were going to get a train back to London, and I got to the top of the stairs, and I went, "Oh, shite! He's trying to get me," and I never felt so crook. And,
really.
I was leaning over the rail, and I thought, "You bastard, you're not going to get me. I'm not giving up yet." So I sort of gathered myself while Her Majesty was barking orders down the bottom, saying, "You're coming in, what's going on? We've got to have lunch. I'm hungry, I'm thirsty." Anyway, I gathered myself and got myself into a little Italian place and had the mandatory pasta and the Chianti and got myself back to London and wasn't feeling any better. So in my inimitable style, I went down to the bar and had a couple of G&Ts, and that didn't make me feel any better either. Next morning, Anthea said to me, "You are crook." And I said, "Yeah, no, I'm not feeling that great." Got into a cab. The cabbie looked at me and said, "We're going straight to whatever hospital Prince Philip was at," which is appropriate. And they just put me in hospital for 3 days, and I was in hospital. Then they said to me, "Look, we're not exactly sure. We know you've had a heart attack, but we don't know how bad it's been. You're going to have to stay with us about a month while we do further tests, or you can piss off back to Australia." So I decided that latter was a better idea.
After Bacchus, heart attack, Shane Warne, somebody died of a heart attack, but our whole family had a checkup. You said you were pretty diligent with your health too, Pete.
I am, yes.
Yeah.
From a medical household, Dad being a doctor, one of my 4 siblings is a doctor, and I've always, every year, I go to my GP, we do all the bloods, and then we do that in 6 months' time, and I've got very fair skin, as you can tell, and I've just had a bad run the last couple of years. I've had five melanoma operations. I've been on the table under anaesthetic with a surgeon, and he's got them all. One was on the side of my head and all the rest in my back. My back's like a railway track.
Okay.
But, they were all low level, but thank God we got them early, because melanoma is an absolute shocker.
Yep.
And so I am vigilant, and I try to tell my children, sunburn isn't great, but they know at 13 and 14. But no, you've got to be. And I think men think they're bulletproof, and we are not bulletproof.
Can I ask you a question, Pete, about reading the news? It's a trust thing, I think. Do you feel extra responsibility? Like you can't go out, you can't get involved in road rage. Like, do you sometimes think, I just want to let loose, or you're always thinking about, it's a very important job and you've got to maintain a certain way? I know that the way you are personally, but...
Well, great question, because it is something, as you say, the way I am, and I am who I am, and I think I'm a very decent human being, and I've been brought up that by like my parents by that. But you're conscious when you're out and about, and particularly when you've got kids and they're doing your head in or whatever. You've got to, you can't. You've got to check yourself. But very conscious, but very grateful to at the same time when people come up and say we watch you every night or you're part of our family and you've been part of our family for decades, and that means a hell of a world, the world, because they're your viewers. They're the ones that keep you in a job because ratings dictate success. And but I think it's a great question, Shane.
Oh, thank you, mate. Well, it leads into my next question is around the interview with Tom Cruise.
Oh yeah,
and I know for a fact that you still know everyone's name in Channel 9. You always have by person, know what they're about. So you're a very thoughtful person. That interview when Tom Cruise said you put your manners back in, the look on your face, like you'd.
I think the look on everybody's face.
Offend him. How did you feel in the stomach when that happened? Did you feel like you wish you went to Crowie Boys? You could have reached across the tail and punched his head in?
No, I just kept. I thought, well, this is interesting. I didn't expect the interview to go this way. I just thought, well, I'm not going to, as Michelle Obama says, they go lower, you go higher. Yeah. And I just kept to myself.
You did.
My course in life, and I didn't get angry and I didn't retaliate. I just said, I think it's a fair question. I think that's how I said it. That's back in about 2004.
Yeah.
It was an interesting interview. It was. It's brought up a lot, actually, wherever I go in the world, whether I do something for 60 Minutes or the Queen's funeral. Some Aussie will bail me up about it. My kids have watched it 1,000 times. They say, Dad, this is going burko on YouTube. Like millions of views. But I've got to say, let me put it on the record, I have no ill will towards Tom.
No.
I think, it was just one of those interviews, and it's certainly a memorable interview that all these years on we're still talking about it. And I loved him in Maverick, and I loved him in Top Gun.
Great actor.
And he brought great joy. But that day, yes, that was one of the more memorable 60
Everyone
Minutes.
has a bad day, I suppose.
As the boss said, we certainly got a promo out of that story, Peter.
Big time. Yeah, well done. Now, Chappelli was your captain.
Yep.
He could be angry too occasionally.
Yes, there's a few X-rated stories I can tell about him on and off the field.
He's a great captain.
Great captain. You'd walk over broken glass for him. There's no question about that. He certainly let you know where you stood. I found when I just got into the Shield team, New South Wales, and it was the first game I played against South Australia, and they had a formidable spin attack in Jenner and Mallet, and had a couple of good quicks in Jeff Hammond and Eric Freeman, and so they were a good side. And I was batting a little higher up, and I was batting about 6 or something like that, and we lost a few, and I'd never had this before, this sort of quiet intimidation. Chappell just walked into my space. He walked where I'd taken centre and marked my spot, and he's come and walked and just put his both feet right on the centre mark and started moving the field. And he was waiting for me to say, excuse me, because I know what that was going to put me. I just sort of stood there and I was bemused. I was absolutely gobsmacked. And he moved the field, and it was as if he was moving.
You should give him a kiss.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that would have got any better result somehow. But no, he was formidable. And he told me at the second test at Lords, when Bob Massey was weaving magic like I'd never seen before, it was just extraordinary. And there was a little bit there for the bowlers, but there wasn't that much. And he just was fantastic. Dennis was never 100% on that tour either. His back was never 100%. We spent a lot of my job was to get him into the room without the media harassing him and getting him into a bath, a hot bath, and getting the Radox. And, it sounds a bit motherly, but which is not my natural game. But he appreciated that, and my job was to keep the bastards away. And the English media, as you know, can be pretty relentless. And so Chappelli came to me during the second test, and Bob was getting tired, but he was still swinging the ball. Dennis was off the field. His back was killing him. He said, "You reckon you can bowl quick?" He told me you can bowl quick. He said, "If ever there's a time for you to bowl quick is right now. I want you to bowl the quickest spell of bowling you've ever bowled." And I bowled, which is kind of cricket really. I probably bowled 10 of the best overs on the spot that I'd ever bowled before. None for 8.
Fantastic.
But isn't that funny? You could have bowled 10 of the worst overs you've ever bowled and get 3 for 8.
Exactly.
But that was the way it was.
But none for 8 is a nice figures, isn't it?
It is, mate. That's why.
It is, but it's not a week. But anyway, look, the point,
stepped up. The
point of the exercise is that he got me.
He inspired you.
Cranked up, yes, really cranked up.
I did, for that doco I did, geez, I've said to him a couple of times, now we just got to keep this interview nice and short and tight.
Yeah.
And you can go down some foxholes, I can tell you. He can tell some stories.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Oh, hell yes.
You're talking about the media. I want to ask you, Pete, about the state of journalism right now and where it's at and how much it's changed in the last few years. Because you look at, I'm doing a podcast here, everyone seems to be a reporter in some sort of way these days, whether it's on social media. Do you think potentially, you look at, people used to always be home for the 6 o'clock news, and that's changed now. People want to get their content however they want to consume it. Do you think you're sort of the last sort of era of true journalism?
Well, I think journalism still plays a critical role, and when you talk about social media, we might get a lot of news leads off social media, but you still got to be a journalist and check the facts.
Yes.
Because too many people pull the trigger and then go, oh dear, we got that wrong, or we didn't check that out, and that video was actually 5 years old, and whatever. 6 o'clock, free-to-air TV is still a critical part of our community. There's no question about that. Numbers have come down a little bit because, as you said, we can get our news from various sources. So a lot of mates overseas watch Nine News on their phones or their computers, they're on their bus or the train going home. So the measuring system is still just measuring from people's TVs at home. But there are still hundreds of thousands of eyeballs on the 6 o'clock news.
Yes.
You can time shift it, of course, but it's still part of people's lives. I hope it continues long past me, but I do, over the 12 years I've been reading the news at 9, it has changed, there's no question. And the biggest driver is technology. So now we can, whether it's citizen journalists with their iPhones and sending in vision, and usually it's bad vision, and and so it's news can sometimes go down a path of negativity and not happy news, and we've got to be careful. We've got to be careful. And I always say in the newsroom, we've got to give stories of hope as well.
You've got to.
We need to talk about hope. During COVID, Shane, it was extraordinary, the viewing numbers that we were getting.
Yeah.
Because that was a pandemic, people were home, and there was this absolute craving for information. And I was doing national bulletins at 9 o'clock at night and going live to news conferences with the Prime Minister. We were getting, close to 1 million viewers across the country every night. So it's still, that was a reminder of how important a news bulletin is.
I totally agree. And Fox, I've asked you a similar sort of question around advertising. You always remind me of, remember that TV series Mad Men? That's what sort of, I always pictured you in the advertising agency with a nice suit on, drinking whiskey
at 9 o'clock in the morning,
having a cigar with the hot PA. Is that?
Well, forget the cigar bit, but Well, look, that the 70s was the era that I sort of cut my teeth in the advertising industry, and I met some serious characters, and it's very, very hard to explain the real dynamics of the advertising industry in those days. But it was anything goes, and if you didn't entertain your client day and night, or your prospect, or your staff, for motivational reasons, of course, but
it's true. It was the early days of Channel 9.
It was still sales.
Channel 9 sales directors, David Evans and
Vance
and Michael Whiting on Channel 10, and they were just absolute rogues, but they were great rogues, and the whole industry was, somehow or other, we got commercials to air, and we got ads into the media, et cetera, and we did them well. And I'd have to say the creativity presented in those days was far superior to
well, look at Mojo now. And stuff like that, what they could produce.
Wonderful.
But the platforms, you really only had 3 shows in town. Right. You had TV, newspapers and radio. And you had, as you say, these creative forces. And the other thing is, you didn't have iPhones.
No.
So you couldn't record the rogue behaviour.
Yeah. Thank
And
God.
it's like the old footy tours and the old
Thank
cricket
God.
tours.
Yeah,
It's a different game, and it was I remember starting as a young bloke at 9 and just thinking, wow, these sales teams, they lead a great life, and they go on some great junkets.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
But
That's their job.
they were making for Channel 9 more money than they knew what to do with.
Absolutely. And
Pete, one of my favourite stories is I was an all-rounder like Fox. We both played for the Mossman Cricket Club.
I played for the Lane Cove D4s, if anyone wants to know.
yeah, no, I checked your record out. It's impressive.
And we both, lucky enough, 2005, Mossman named the team of the century, and I was picked to bat number 5, team of the century. Alan Border was in there. Ian Craig was captain, and you were number 6, Fox.
Yes.
And as we stood up there to get our Mossman blazers, Fox leads over and says to me, "I hope we're rooming together." We still haven't been on that tour, mate.
Oh, what a tour that would have been, gee.
But you two, and I know it's your podcast, Shane, but you two are, you have achieved what someone like me and thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of other young men and women will never achieve, and that is to represent your country in my favourite sport, cricket, and travel the world and do it in a really great era.
Yep.
You're very lucky.
It's 100%
We
a
are.
wonderful time, and I get really upset when I hear sports people whinging about how tough it is.
Oh, my goodness
You're
me.
travelling around the world. You get
It was tough in the Foxes' day.
I know.
Yeah, have a look at
Yeah.
the body; it's a mess. But but I wouldn't swap it for a second. And I get absolutely peed off about these fast bowlers. Yes, what's going on? They spend. I mean, Hazelwood, I think he's a great bowler, but he doesn't do enough work. None of them do enough work. You've got to go to the nets and bowl. We had to go to the nets 3 times a week and bowl for at least an hour each time.
Yeah.
You had to bowl. I mean, that's the only way you got fit.
Get the groove, yeah.
And all this rubbish about, they got sports psychologists and what do you need them for?
Do you like T20?
No, not at
You
all.
don't?
I've got a
You would have been good at it.
Oh, yeah, I'd have been very good at it. Yeah, I don't know that I would have liked this leg stump thing or the
I reckon someone from Lane
bouncer
Cove
thing.
D4s could even get a game this year.
Well, the thing that I figure it shouldn't be called cricket. See, I think it's cannibalising the greatness of the game of cricket.
Okay.
And I'd rather call it whack-it. Because it's still got the kit bit, but it's not cricket. It's whack-it.
Well, as a consumer, I still love Test cricket. I can watch every
I do
ball over 5 days.
Yeah.
And then I still love a one-day because as a
Yes,
teenager,
yes.
I used to go out to the SCG with my mates and sit on the hill and tell these young girls that I was an F111 pilot. And, and they go, really? And I go,
South Africa.
really? but you got Graham Wood and Bruce Laird and all those guys out there.
Imagine if you had this headgear sitting on there. You could have got away with the
Exactly.
the pilot thing. Hey, I just want to ask you, Pete, you've got 2 daughters.
Yes.
And Jessica, obviously your wife, in the media as well. Are they destined to be in the media space themselves?
I don't believe so.
Right.
They tell me that they're proud of me and what I do and what their mum's achieved, and that means a lot, but they by no means watch the news every night. I'm just dad, and I love that. I love that about them. I think Allegra, she would like to be an actor.
Okay.
Giselle, I think, will be a doctor or a vet or a lawyer or an eco-warrior on a global scale. They're phenomenal young kids. And you know what the best part about being a dad to these 2 girls, and Jessica and I have really worked hard on this, is communication. And we are very good, the 4 of us, at communicating. And they tell us everything. And I've always said to them, you can tell mum and dad anything. We won't judge you, but we'll help you.
Yeah.
So whether it's really bad and something's happened or whatever.
That's good.
No, we're here.
No, well done. I ask everyone the same question that comes on Lunch with Lee. I'll ask you first, Fox. If a young boy or girl right now wanted to go into the world of cricket, professional world, what advice would you give them?
Don't lose yourself in your own self-importance. Focus on the job. Focus on the job totally and utterly, and don't listen to advice. Take advice only from people you respect and people who've been there, done that.
Right, okay.
That's what I would do, but the focus is the key.
And Pete, a young boy or girl wants to go into journalism or the media, what advice would you give them?
Well, it's a tougher game now than when I started, and there's a lot of people. I think you've got to be passionate. I love people's stories, and I love learning about people. You've got to have that passion. A lot of our world is now sort of Instagram and stuff, and it's all gauged on likes. And I think a lot of people try to go in because they they think, oh, I'm going to be famous. I call it the supermarket syndrome.
Yeah,
I'll be recognised in the supermarket. So you've got to have that passion. You've also got to have perseverance, and you've got to have patience, because there ain't a whole lot of jobs at the pointy end. You know, I've been lucky, 60 Minutes reporter and reading the iconic Channel 9 6 o'clock news. Very lucky.
Yep.
And you get plucked out of a big pack. So I say to my mates' kids, when they ask me, I say, look, I think university would be a great thing.
Yep.
Do communications, because that's what you want to do. But if you have the ability and the fortitude and the want, back it up with a law alongside it, or economics, or something else. Because you can enter the media
all different ways
as a lawyer and then transition into journalism or an accountant or whatever. Just have a couple of, quivers in your... in the bow. In the bow, yeah. I think it's something like bows in the arrow. That'll do.
Arrow in the bow.
I know what you mean. Well, I want to thank you both. I want to thank you both for coming on Lunch with Lee. We're here at the beautiful Mossman Rowers, nestled on the bay.
Sensational.
Fox, you must have come down here over the years.
I have been.
A few good
I've
nights
been here. I've had a couple of very good nights.
Cut a few from the herd here, I reckon.
Springing back some very fond memories.
Had a schnitzel here the other night.
Look around, you can't go bad. Can't go wrong with
Is
a
this
schnitzel.
your super yacht just on approach, Fox?
Yes, it is.
It's very nice.
James is picking me up. James Packer.
We'll go downstairs now. We have a bite to eat. But thanks again. Thanks, Pete.
Thanks,
and
Shane.
thanks, Fox. Really appreciate it. Cheers, guys. That's it for Lunch with Lee this week. A big thank you goes out to our guests, Peter Overton and David Fox Colley. Thanks to Mossman Rowers for having us here today. And thanks to our sponsors, Elite Bet. Make sure you hit follow on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts from. And do us a favour, hit 5 stars while you're there. And if you're passionate, please leave a review. Also, come check us out on Instagram at I'm at Lunch with Lee. Our official Lunch with Lee photography was done by Felicity Kelly. You can find her on Instagram at Felicity Kelly Portraits. And once again, thanks to our producer, Dan McHugh. We'll be back soon with some more legends to talk about sport, music and business on another cracking episode of Lunch with Lee. We'll see you then.